Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. It is another epi of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you fine feathered folks for what I guess we're calling Week 10. It starts to get a bit ambiguous as you get into playoffs and there's buys or not buys, different rounds, different formats, but Week 10 has a nice enough ring to it. So yes, we are back for some more timely global power rankings.
I'll be honest, I've completely forgotten. I've jumbled all the numbers, whatever
Every
week we're in at this
different
point.
Week anyways.
Exactly. To me, doesn't matter. All I need to know, playoffs are heating up and ending, and we got MSI around the corner. So this is critical time when we are looking at these global power rankings. Important to have these type of check-ins.
And might be one of the last times before we're doing these proper MSI previews for it. And spoilers, usually it's a top 20 we're doing. There's only 19 on this list. And we'll get to why there's only 19. But first, we start with that big board, 10 different squads, 22-11. And Mark, if I told you a few weeks ago, let's go even further back. If I told you 6 weeks ago, Shopify Rebellion would be on this list, what would you tell me?
I'd ask what subscription for Crazy Pills you're on at this point in time, because you are crazy. If you had visioned this all the way back then, pick any week, even last week, I'll throw it into this type of category to predict something like this and this turnaround for a Shopify Rebellion. This is the good ending, it seems, where a lot of, down bad and everything else has worked itself out, where we are finally finding the best version of this Shopify roster. A Shopify roster which we admitted at the beginning of the year did have talent, did have pieces. There was still going to be multiple question marks on whether it would ever come together as a cohesive whole. I think that answer is starting to be shown, and we are seeing that in these playoffs. And unfortunately for Team Liquid, they get to face off against it and face the wrath of it.
And I mean, at times it looked like, this team only had 2 series wins in that first kind of round of action, and they've already surpassed or tied that here in playoffs. Obviously a nice level up against Team Liquid. It obviously speaks to a bit of a floundering of Team Liquid, who's a squad who's kind of hovered around this 18 to 22 kind of zone for the majority of the season, and we already talked about them going back to the drawing board, surely, for what we're going to be getting into next year. Weibo Gaming gets dropped a spot. They lose Game 4 to IG. Season's over for them. And then we've got a debut. It's not Talon, who we had on here. It is GAM Esports. Very familiar squads or players coming back here. Kiaya Levi still there. All they did in this playoff run was lose to the Flying Oysters. They did it in Game 3 earlier in the series, or earlier in the playoff push, and then they force a Game 5 against them, and at least 4 out of the 5 games in this series were incredibly exciting and competitive. The 5th game, they had a whopping 2 kills at 30 minutes, which is unheard of in this type of meta.
Unheard of in almost any region, but especially in the LCP, to see that type of stuff go on between these two teams. And again, that's one of those things where you can talk about, and you can see that in any type of region, that type of pressure, that type of apprehension that creeps in a do or die Game 5 type of situation for a lot of these teams. Even the most blood-hungry, bloodthirsty of them all out there, of course, with the Gigabyte Marines. But very happy to welcome them back in onto the MSI stage, having earned their spot. I think having them and the Flying Oysters be the representatives is quite a 1-2 punch for a region like this, and to try and continue that path of asserting themselves and building up their recognition on the international stage. You're sending 2 very strong teams, and we start off with the Gigabyte Marines here on the list.
Ahead of that second seed from the LCP, we've got the tumble, the collapse, the fall off of a cliff. And listen, it felt like Top Esports were waiting to burst, and I mean that in the worst possible way. They were just holding on to like that top tier contender status, but everyone, us included, even more so other people, were waiting for this bubble to burst and for us to realize what version of TES they really are. We got it in Game 5 against World Elite as they completely collapsed their way out of playoffs.
And it felt like an implosion in that game 5. It didn't really even also feel like too much about what was on the side of World Elite, what they were proactively doing. It felt like that self-sabotage running into that situation in game 5. Of course, the self-sabotage everybody is really familiar with, unfortunately, from top esports when you look at the international scene for these ones. So I think you're going to have quite a lot of our viewers and fans here that are checking in on the global scene going to be breathing a sigh of relief seeing top esports falter at this point within the LPL playoffs and kick themselves out of contention for an MSI spot.
And you'll see a few spots, obviously World Elite ahead of them, who they lost that head-to-head to. A few of them is IG, which is now the next round of playoffs. And, you know, IG, they're a few spots ahead. They will and should be favorites in that matchup. But World Elite has already, I mean, they've knocked out Gen.G and Top Esports during this Dark Horse run. Those are two squads that throughout a lot of the year we had in the top 5.
Oh, what a showdown this one's going to be in the LPL playoffs. You have all the mojo, all the energy, all the fandom behind this reinvigorated version of Invictus Gaming with Rookie, the Shy, Gala, and what they can bring to the table on Summoner's Rift. And on the other side, it is the upstart WE, the dark horse of these LPL playoffs, which we always know there's always at least one in the LPL playoffs. So always, every time there's someone that manages to turn the odds around, is it going to be WE? Can they continue that in their matchup head-to-head against IG?
And again, that will be, if they take down IG, this is approaching like an all-time underdog run that we're seeing out of World Elite. In between those two LPL squads, we've got a bit of this Western bubble kind of getting taken down a peg. It's a combination of some other teams climbing up to take some of those spots, but Cloud9 obviously played a very competitive series, almost had the reverse sweep against FlyQuest, but that 5th game, you really saw the difference in power at the top of the table of the LTA.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think for Cloud9, they achieved a lot of the things that we wanted to see from them in that series against FlyQuest. A lot of the challenges that we issued out to them and how they would respond, how they would improve, all these things. You're getting that check mark until you reach that game 5. And there's a lot of issues, lots of problems in that 5th and final game, and a lot of positives on that side for FlyQuest that you do have to reevaluate, and you do look at the situation with a lot of other teams, as you mentioned, that are going to be leapfrogging, moving on, continuing their playoff path journey towards hopefully MSI. That Cloud9 gets a punishment here, whether you think it should be as severe as their fall is or not type of situation. It's the cost of losing one of these head-to-heads just so tightly in the LTA.
And same can be said for both G2 and Carmine Corp. G2 suffers a little bit more of the wrath, and that's really because their series wasn't as close. You feel like KC had a much better chance, and I'm not going to say coin flip, but one or two plays go differently in this series, and we're probably talking about them being in the finals or maybe even taking down G2. G2 just seemed like they weren't fully ready on the day for what Koi was cooking up. I don't know if that was a combination of we already beat these guys earlier in playoffs. We know that they can be kind of wishy-washy. We were expecting to play Carmine Corp because I think a lot of other people were expecting that matchup, but they were not ready on the day, and Koi punched him in the mouth.
Yeah, they did. They gave him that 1-2 combination, the left and the right hook through to the mouth, and that punch from them, and the way that series played out. For me, I would favor Carmine Corp over a G2 in this type of situation at this point in time from what we have seen from them. But still, it is one of those ones where maybe this is that harsh lesson that you got to learn, the little marginal differences for a team like Carmine Corp, where you realize the advantage of being in the position that squad like G2 was in, and where they lose their matchup. And it is at that point where you're still going to MSI as opposed to Carmine Corp, where it was that win or die type of situation to get into MSI. That would maybe be a further stepping point, stone for this Carmine Corp group as they move into another split with the goal of being the very top team within the region. But you're looking at these two, and then of course, as we know, Movistar Koi ahead of them. Relatively happy about them, but I think that G2 out of all of them still has some work to do heading towards this MSI tournament.
A team that doesn't have much work to do, and last one on this list is the only undefeated squad still on this list, and that of course is the Flying Oysters, who completed their perfect split 10-0 in series. It it came down to the wire, that game 5, as we mentioned, against GAM, and I'm chalking up this 2-kill game at 30 minutes to both teams being a little more tentative, passive, even though they had both already clinched a spot at MSI. The sheer level of dominance that we've seen throughout the entire run for the Flying Oysters. And let's be honest, this new revamped league in the LCP is very different than the LTA, where this is like the most competitive that, let's say, the PCS, formerly the PCS, has ever been, and we still have this team go 10-0.
Yes, very different. The very basic of explanation for it is it truly is one of these ones where the regions have combined and you're playing everybody. You're working against one another up and down all the way through it to try and find who is the very best and strengthen each other. You look at the LTA, not a lot of interaction going on between the two regions and the separate parts of it and everything else. But the story here is about the Flying Oysters, their undefeated record and how that keeps going. And I know a lot of people sometimes undefeated doesn't carry exactly the same prestige as you might think it does with the title and what comes with achieving it. A lot of people kind of dismiss it. They go, the competition wasn't enough, whatever, at these point in times. That just isn't the case when you're looking at the Oysters and how they were tested and who they had to fight against and how it was within the LCP. They are very much a welcome back contestant from First Stand and very thrilled to see what they've got in store for us at a bigger, much more thorough international event like MSI.
We've also got a welcome back for a little bit of a roller coaster coming. I don't think I could even say welcome back or back into the top 10. There's no chance we had KT in the top 10 at any other point this year. Obviously, the 6-0 start against both D+ and Nongshim, enough for them to come barreling into the top 10 and push down Nongshim a few pegs as well. We've already talked about BDD picking up still pretty much most of the MVPs for this squad, but we do need to highlight the consistency of Cuz, the veteran, the level up of Doc Dom in that bot lane, or excuse me, not Cuz, Gideon stepping up for them, and then Perfect T as well, kind of stepping away from being the young rookie and getting some more carry potential. It's everyone. I'm not saying getting to BDD's level, because no one on the team is stepping there, but at least going up a peg.
And that really does matter, having both Gideon and Perfect T find a way to contribute a little bit more, lessen that load, the significance of BDD's performance and how he's factoring into the game for this team. One of the big factors why it is that 6-0 run through these playoffs so far for the Roller Coaster. Heading on in, everybody make sure you're getting that safety belt on, because we're going up against T1 next. This one is going to be the doozy, the telecom war. Of course, you all know the pressure in the playoffs for this one. MSI still in distance for both of these teams. Very much so excited about this head-to-head. I think Perfect T leveling up and providing more of a different angle, more of some carry options for this KT Roaster team is kind of exactly what you need to slide up and get an advantage, have a different edge against a squad like T1, because we, of course, already know BDD and Faker, that is going to be the premier lane I want to be watching in this matchup.
And yeah, because of how hot, and we've talked about like 10 of 11 series or whatever KT has had, it feels weird to have T1 ahead of them, who came in on a losing streak of 2 matches, and it's such a hard anomaly to rank, because heading into playoffs, it's like you just give T1 these extra golden points, because you know, looking at history, that they're going to turn things on for playoffs.
This is one that is not simply justified by the actual numbers, the statistics, everything else that you're looking at. This is a bit of history, a bit of mojo, a bit of an evaluation, a guess of where you feel like this squad is going to be. And T1, more than anybody, gets extra points, extra level up for some of these situations when you're looking at playoffs. It's, again, still going to be hard to know. It's been enough time between it that you don't know exactly what the form is going to be. How's the preparation? What's the read? All sorts of things. You do look at history of this roster, of the coaching staff, and you have to have faith in T1, even heading into a telecom war.
Yeah, but despite that, you see T1 flanked by a couple Western teams in the obviously impressive Koi run and what FlyQuest has been doing all split. T1 is vulnerable, and the current form a Western team could compete with them. Yes, they're going to level up internationally and probably absolutely smash them. But right now, what we're seeing, what we just saw out of Koi running through Carmine Corp and G2 in increasingly convincing fashion, obviously they skyrocket here into that number 8 spot. And then FlyQuest, you can talk about the region not being as competitive, but this is a team that has been dominant basically from start to finish in this year. They have the highest Dragon and Atacon percentage of all teams in the major regions.
Oh, hand it over. I'm having some of that green watermelon Kool-Aid that's going on for FlyQuest over here in the LTA, because yes, I believe that this is a situation where it is rarefied air for Western teams to be up into this type of consideration and passing over some of the expected attendees from the LCK, from the LPL when you're looking at a global power rankings list. But I'm buying it. I'm drinking it all up right now with what we have seen from FlyQuest, how they continue to push it and show their excellency. I think, again, one of these ones where it's tough, where you need to have that harder end of competition when you start to try and justify yourself into this type of tier. One of the ways you can do that, booking your ticket to MSI as that lone representative for the LTA North and finding a way to carve out some good matches against these teams ahead of us.
And let's make no mistake, one of the reasons why we have these two Western teams so high is this middle chunk is a little weaker, a little more wide open than it has been in years past. We just talked about T1 kind of slumping. KT has surged in. The third best team in the LPL is... it's rotated. It's been musical chairs throughout every split. We've talked about Gen.G, Top Esports, IG has slipped in there, Weibo's been in there. There's been just a rotating menu of who we've talked about in the LPL sliding in.
And I want to keep a little healthy reminder on the side that, yes, as we talk about these and evaluate them, you can still look at the, the fourth best team coming out of the LPL and the LCK, specifically the LCK, has already won the World Championship before. So it really isn't all just about the very tippity top of these top tier regions. They do have a lot of that depth that you don't have within the LTA and the LEC, and as we know in these type of things. But when you're looking at that ultra high end and where we feel about it, I'm comfortable throwing FlyQuest into this type of category within a lot of the other friends that it finds at this type of number.
You heard it here first. Nongshim, world champions, heading into 2025. Going to be the ones taking it home, getting some nice noodle bowl skins, maybe. Into the top 5, though, and this is actually, it's not the top 5. I alluded to, there's only 19 teams on this board. We just talked about this middle tier not really being up to standard. We had Top Esports hanging around in the top 5 and said this team kind of barely deserves to be here. Then they throw it down against World Elite. We can't put anyone. Nobody deserves to be on the same board as these top 4 squads. That's why they are so far ahead. And it so seemingly works out that the highest kills per game of all major region teams are these 4 squads.
Unbelievable that there is that consistency amongst these excellent teams at the very top of the global power rankings. And you're right that it is having to be just the top 4, not a top 5 type of situation at this time with Top Esports bowing out of the situation. You're looking at that middle tier, as you said, nobody really jumping up to be even close to that territory where you're saying, you know what? Okay, number 5, you're right below number 4. It doesn't feel right given just how far ahead these top 4 truly are. And it's not a situation where there's a ton of separation between them all because they've all been so fantastic when you're looking at this top 4. It really is about, to me, what flavor? What is your particular flavor of excellency that you prefer, that you think is the most valuable, is the one that guarantees you the most chance of coming away with an MSI title? That's who I would allow you to go through in this one and look at that top 4 list and sort them out however you'd like at home.
And obviously, because we did have the LPL head-to-head, Anyone's Legend takes back that 3 spot winning in Game 5, but there wasn't enough there in that series to not think that if BLG can get a rematch in the grand finals, they could easily take that series. That's how close and evenly matched these 2 squads showed they were in that last series.
Yeah, I do think that it's important to mention that through that series, how things played out. Of course, the big moments, the big players, and everything else that you're expecting to see go through. I got to give one of the ones that we talked about lots of times, checking in on this one, Mr. Flandre, up in that top side, how he's been able to manage it for this Anyone's Legend team, and especially into a matchup like Bin in this high pressure situation. I think that he handled himself very well, and one of these things that we keep track of. But almost enough about these LPL guys. I want to be looking at the two from the LCK, and I want to be talking about the perfection from Gen.G and how they keep it rolling. Again, it's something that we have seen before, so it lessens it, which is unfair because of how good, how dominant, how excellent this Gen.G team truly has been, and what level of confidence and excitement there should be around them potentially going through to MSI.
I'm pretty sure I said earlier, Flying Oyster, the only undefeated team. That's how under the radar Gen.G going perfect is. You even forget about it. You're almost expecting this team to go 17-1 at bare minimum. Obviously, these two squads are going to have their big showdown over the weekend. And yes, Gen.G is the one that's been perfect, but I feel like what level Zeus is at is the biggest dictating factor for this series, because you look at any of the top lane numbers throughout this split, and he is leaps and bounds ahead in CS numbers, solo kills, damage percentage. We know that this guy can and will take over at least a couple games in a series.
Yeah, it's the balance between the perfection that you have seen from Gen.G, just clean, perfect performances, and then you're looking at the side of Hanwha Life, knowing that there is some variance, there is a possibility that it isn't going to be the very best on the day, but you give them that factor of, well, it also could be even better than what you expect on the day, given that it's going to be a playoff series. It is going to be one of these high pressure ones, and you have a player, an X factor like Zeus, who loves to step up, loves to be involved in these type of series, these type of moments. The pressure, the bigger the stage, the better the performance that we usually see from him. Cannot wait to see these two in action.
That does also open up the door for Keen, who I feel like has far and away been the guy we've talked about the least on Gen.G, at least here in 2025. I think we were giving him his flowers last year a lot of the time, but Chovy has another immaculate split. Ruler and Duro have been leveling up. Canyon is Canyon. Keen, if he can have a statement series against Zeus in that head-to-head, well, then we can be talking about him a whole lot more on that top side. But that is it today for League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you. Absolutely beautiful individuals. Thank you so much for hanging out with us as always, and you know we will catch you on that flippity flip.